a shop owner going out of business, an aloof employee willing to go to desperate measures, a strange plant with a taste for human flesh. All this can only mean one thing. We're comparing Little Shop of Horrors on this episode of Retro vs. Remake.
I'm Reggie Parker.
And I'm Dan Bulick. Welcome to another episode of Retro vs. Remake, the podcast where we discuss films and their remakes. Join us as we explore the question, should this remake exist? Today's film is Little Shop of Horrors, the original Little Shop of Horrors, 1960, starring Jonathan Hayes, Jackie Joseph, Mel Wells, Dick Miller, and Jack Nicholson. Directed by Roger Corman. Screenplay by Charles B. Griffith. He was also the voice of Audrey Jr. And music by Fred Katz. Little Shop of Horrors, 1986, starring Rick Moranis, Ellen Greene, Vincent Gardenia, Steve Martin, John Candy, Bill Murray, and Levi Stubbs as Audrey II. Directed by Frank Oz. Screenplay by Howard Ashman. The music by Miles Goodman. And the songs in the movie are written by Alan Menken and Howard Ashman. Okay, just before we get started, a note that the remake is actually not entirely based on the original film, but off the off-Broadway musical that was made in 1982. Reggie, what is your first experience with either film?
First experience is watching it for this episode.
Okay.
Just completely missed this one. Familiar enough with some of the big catchphrases like "Feed Me Seymour." I'm familiar with that and the zeitgeist, as it were, but I've never actually watched the film.
I have watched the remake when I was younger. It was on HBO all the time. I don't really remember it too much because I was really young when it first came out, but I definitely remember watching it, and I think it scared me because that plant was just eating people and just scaring me. I definitely watched it. Kind of remembered a couple of the songs, like you said, just kind of in the zeitgeist. Like the Little Shop of Horrors, the main theme. I already kind of knew that before rewatching it for this. And the original, I never watched. I just knew Jack Nicholson was in it because I guess I'd seen something about one of his earliest roles. Yeah, my first time watching the original was for this.
First, run through. When I was doing some research after the fact, I realized that was Jack Nicholson, but I really wasn't paying that much attention at the time. But we'll get into characters down the line.
Yeah, there you go, Jack Nicholson, very early Jack. Okay, before we get into our comparison, let's go over a synopsis. A lot of things changed, so this is going to be very short and brief. We begin in 1960 Skid Row. Mr. Mushnick runs his failing flower shop. Employed there are Seymour and Audrey. Mr. Mushnick proclaims that the shop will be out of business soon. However, Seymour has a unique plant which he thinks might help save the shop. The plant is some type of Venus flytrap. To Mushnick's surprise, the plant is a hit. People begin spending lots of money just to see the unique plant, which Seymour named after Audrey. Business is good, but suddenly the plant starts dying. Not sure what to do, Seymour stays up all night with the plant trying to nurse it back to health. Accidentally, Seymour cuts himself and discovers that the plant thrives on his blood. Seymour then becomes the plant's only source of nourishment as he drains blood from his fingers. Soon the blood from his fingers isn't enough. The plant needs to eat people. Seymour then brings bodies to the plant. One of the victims is the local dentist. Mr. Mushnick even sees Seymour with a body one night. Once the plant is healthy, things begin to fall in place. Seymour is getting fame, and soon he will have fortune and Audrey, whom he has always loved all along. However, the plant craves more food, more victims, and Seymour finally has had enough. He confronts the plant in one final showdown, and each movie ends their own respective ways. Okay, so very brief. Lots of the characters are the same, but lots of things are different. So let's get into those differences. And I think the first place to start is just that they're two different genres, pretty much. The original is just a straight-out comedy, while the remake is a musical comedy. Like we said, it was based on an off-Broadway musical. So, did it help the remake? What do you think?
I think that it does help the remake to be its own unique thing. Well, one, the subject matter for both films is obviously it's comedic, but with a sense of danger. Like there is that horror element to the story, but overall they're both comedies. I think by making a musical, it really gets to embrace like a subject matter that if you didn't do it as a musical, I think you'd have to address more backstory than you'd have to. But it's just kind of tongue in cheek once it becomes a musical. So there's not really a lot of questions or you have to ask about what's happening in the film because if there are questions, they'll be answered by a song.
Yeah, they definitely use the music to help just advance the story. We have these three girls there. They're acting like a Greek chorus. They're explaining what just happened or what the character's going through. So it really makes it easy as an audience member to digest exactly what's happening through these songs. It definitely helps benefit from what I see all around. I don't think there's really any negatives with putting any music. Well, first off, the original is a short film on its own. It's like barely over an hour, and the remake's only an hour and a half. So it's not like the music makes it any longer either. You're getting these catchy songs helping explain the story. I think it's win-win.
Oh, 100% agreed because I'm just thinking about trying to watch the film if they had done it without the musical element, just as a straight up movie. I'm sure it could have been interesting and well done, but the subject matter really does lend itself to the camp of a musical. So I think it's just a really smart choice because trying to watch it sort of straight up with the same subject matter, I think I'd be trying to poke more holes into the film, and that didn't really happen because, like you said, everything was so catchy and fun. You just go with it because it fits the theme. I liked it.
And another thing, just going back to what you said before, it helps with the characters too, because now our main characters are all getting their own songs, so we're learning about their motivations, we're learning about who they are as people. So it lets us spend more time with them, so you start to invest in the characters more. Like I said, the original was pretty short, so we don't spend a lot of time on a lot of the characters, but by giving each of the main characters their own kind of song and message about what they want to do for the future, it works really well.
Because when you watch the original, sort of every character that you get introduced to has a very obvious character trait that sort of gets driven home. So they don't spend a lot of time on everyone's motivation. They just point out, hey, this person's greedy, or this person's family members are always dying. This person's sick, so it's easy to latch on to what the character's sort of trait is, and it allows you to understand sort of what their motivation is. But in the musical, again, like musicals do, they're telling you exactly what they're thinking because your inner monologue can become more of the actual dialogue through song. It's a very smart addition.
I guess one other positive is it also helps sort of solidify it that it's in the 60s, the style of music, especially when it's those three girls. It's very much like the Supremes or something like that. And then you also heard something in the background really quickly in the remake about like President Kennedy. So it's like that type of music plus a little President Kennedy, just like, okay, this is definitely in the 60s. It's not in the 80s. So I know where I am. Okay, this music makes sense.
That's a good point. The costume design comes into play, some of the sets and the cars that are being driven, the way people are talking. The remake does a good job of framing what time everything's happening. The original really doesn't focus on, when things are occurring in terms of the decade because it's just really living in the moment. But because this is like an homage to this older film, the remake does a really good job, like you mentioned, with showing you that it's based in a certain time frame with the way people are dressed, the way people talk, and like you said, the Kennedy line. You could miss it if you're not paying attention, but it, again, reinforces when everything's happening.
Yeah. I guess I did have maybe just one little negative. I mean, it's really music heavy, the movie, and it's pretty easy or pretty quickly, once the song starts, you know what the song's about. Like, oh, this is about Audrey and what she wants for the future, or this is what Seymour wants for the future. So the songs are a little long and there's a lot of them, so I would sometimes just check out a little bit because I'm like, I get it. I know what's happening. And, some of the songs just repeat a bit, especially Suddenly Seymour.
Suddenly Seymour.
I like it, but I guess just for me, it was just a little longer than I prefer. That's all.
From a musical perspective, I would say that there are some very, very strong songs that you don't mind being longer. Than there's other songs, like you mentioned, that get repetitive. They're not really that unique or, entertaining sometimes to hear some of them. So there's a sort of a range of the quality of song you're getting. I noticed that because, like you mentioned, Suddenly Seymour definitely sticks out to me as a song that I get it. You know, they like each other, but why is this 5 minutes?
Yeah. It's really cool in the beginning when you see the opening credits and you're like, oh man, this is going to be an awesome movie. But then I guess it sort of loses its kind of mystique as you keep doing more and more musical numbers that don't have those cool visuals all the time. So I guess the less catchy the song was and the less visual appealing it was, the less I would pay attention overall.
What I'm thinking about it is the songs that were upbeat to me were really the strong point.
Yes.
And I think that part of it is it is an upbeat song, and then like you mentioned the visuals. But when they slow things down, I found that those moments, I think I wasn't really too concerned with their relationships. I was more sort of concerned with like the big elephant in the room, in this case, the big plant in the room, and what's going on there. And I was a little more focused on that than the Seymour Audrey relationship, as it were. So I found when they slowed it down, that was when I tended to check out. But like I said, it's more of a small musical gripe. Not really, doesn't really make the movie bad per se. It's just
Yeah, I agree with you because the star of the movie is the plant. You want to see the plant. And then while Seymour and Audrey are cute, and I guess you want to see them together, we don't want to spend the whole movie with them. And those long musical numbers that they have do drag on a little bit. And like you said, the upbeat, visually exciting musical numbers are definitely the ones that draw you in the most.
I will say this as well because there's a musical element, but both films are comedies. The original, Sign of the Times, it's kind of like on the nose of all the comedy, and there's some genuinely funny aspects to the film. I really did like the comedic aspects of the original, but I felt that a lot of the comedy in the remake was really subtle, which made it a lot funnier for me. For instance, before like the Suddenly Seymour song, when she's talking about her past and the clothes that she was wearing when she met her boyfriend, which we'll get into, and she's like, not nice clothes like what I'm wearing now. And she's like, she's got a very unique way that she dresses, and I found that like moments like that were funny, and I wish there was a little bit more of that as opposed to the longer runtime on the songs.
Yeah, I agree with that too. I guess going back to the comedy aspect of the original, a lot of those jokes too were pretty subtle, and sort of a lot of the background characters made a lot of jokes that if you weren't really paying attention, then you wouldn't hear them at all. I guess I should say here that the original, which you know how long it took to shoot the original?
I'm just going to throw a guess out there and call it 5 days.
2.5 days. Close. Double the amount.
I was trying to be generous because the way you were talking, it sounded like it was even less.
Yeah, it was pretty short. And I think they only had like 2 cameras at a time just to get different angles. It doesn't really feel like a movie. It feels almost more like a play because you're getting a lot of these long shots and then you're not really zoomed in on the person who's talking because it's just zoomed out on everybody that's talking all the time. So just the way the original is shot just feels more like a play, while the remake feels more cinematic in what they did, even though that one's based on an off-Broadway play.
Right.
Frank Oz was able to make it feel more like a movie.
I could definitely see that. And you're right, the original, like you said, a lot of zoomed out shots, a lot of people in the vicinity at the same time, sort of taking turns talking, like you saw a little bit of that. It did feel like a play in that aspect. And I think it really lends itself to that, just the way we were saying all of these characters had a unique kind of character trait in general that they work with. So it did help from that aspect of it being like a play.
I think you might have touched on this before, but again, throwing in the musical aspect to this movie definitely sells you the idea that it's a comedy, because it is pretty gruesome subject matter at the core of it, that people are being fed to a plant just so it can grow. Having those musical moments definitely lets you know that this is not serious. This is all a comedy. It's okay. And there are probably bad people dying anyway.
There's elements that we'll talk about as we go through the characters. But when you think about some of the choices of who dies in the films and how they die, the remake to me gives me an even more comedic aspect to it, with the musical numbers and stuff like that. It's like not only is someone like dying, but here's a song about it. Everything in that film feels, in a weird way, although it's more of a realistic film, obviously with the way everything's designed and set, the deaths feel a little more innocent throughout, as it were. Whereas in the original, things seem to start pretty innocent and then ramp up.
Yeah,
in a way you don't see in the remake.
they get pretty dark and and spread out in the original. But I guess we'll get to that. Let's change course here and go over the characters because there's a lot of differences with all the characters actually.
All of them, yeah.
Let's start with our main human character, I guess Seymour. We have Jonathan Hayes in the original, and we have Rick Moranis in the remake. Seymour versus Seymour. Where do you want to start with that?
Funny enough, as I was watching the original, I was thinking about the remake. And I was like, wow, Rick Moranis is actually a pretty damn perfect casting choice based on the character that we see in this original film. Jonathan Hayes, yeah, he's just so I don't know, he's a nerd for sure, but he's just so kind of like pathetic. Is that the right word? Like I don't know, I don't know if pathetic's probably not the right word. Kind of just like ultra innocent.
Yeah, he's very naive. He doesn't understand or know what's happening at all almost.
Yeah, pretty much at all. He's basically like a man child.
Yes, definitely.
I'll say that one difference that we get from the films is that this particular version is a little more hands-on with the creation of the Audrey plant, which I thought was an interesting dynamic because really that's one of the few times we actually get to see, him expressing himself as a character. I thought that it was interesting that he was doing research about plants and different things of that nature. So I felt that was a good opportunity to showcase a character that, other than just being naive and childish, pretty straightforward character, I would say. I don't know, what's your take on Seymour?
By the way, that musical number is one of my favorite musical numbers in the movie when he discovers the Audrey too.
Oh my!
That's great. It's great. I love the way they shot it. I love the song. It's catchy. Anyways, That original Seymour, he definitely is an idiot. They're both kind of idiots. But again, going to the strength of making this movie or making them remake a musical is you do get a moment with Seymour, and he's not just this idiot going through the motions. He does have dreams. He does want to get out of there one day. He has motivation just beyond that flower shop. The original Seymour, he just almost seems like he's just being a good employee. You don't know exactly what he wants. I guess he likes Audrey, but the original is weird because you never really get any one-on-one time with any of the characters. They're always with other people. They never really get to share their motivations. They never really do when they're with the other people, which is another strength of that remake. Just as long as those musical numbers were, they at least let you know the characters and their motivations. So I was able to sympathize a little more with the Rick Moranis Seymour than I was the original, which is also almost by design because I feel like they were making a comedy in the 60s and they weren't exactly trying to make deep characters. They were just trying to make these kind of goofy characters.
Goofy characters and funny moments. So, even though like Seymour is obviously our protagonist, he's the main person, it's kind of like interchangeable, or expendable, even though he's the main character. It doesn't really matter who finds the plan. I guess it matters because he is so naive. Maybe someone else wouldn't have got themselves into that situation. No, I think you're right. Whereas Rick Moranis' character too, we even get a real backstory. It's preposterous, but it's a real backstory of how he ends up in the flower shop. He's basically like more or less a foster child of the shop owner. We do get to see, like you mentioned, his origins, sort of where he's been and where he wants to go. Whereas in the original, we know that he messes up. That's what we know. He messes up all the time. He apparently gets fired all the time, but this time was going to be the last time he got fired unless he got the plant idea to work. But really, other than that, what do we know about him other than that he likes Audrey? Just not much happening with that character.
I'll say this about the remake too. It's definitely more emphasis on the love story. Like I said, the original, they're probably just going for a comedy, and then they maybe kind of threw in the love between Seymour and Audrey just at the very end, which was kind of weak because she kind of falls out of love with him after he's just a little bit weird, but I guess maybe we'll get into that later. Again, by having these moments alone with Seymour, with Audrey, they were able to build on that love story and really make you root for these characters to not only live out their dreams, but to hopefully come together before the movie's over.
Yeah, and as we go to the different characters, we'll be able to sort of talk about a lot of the motivations in the remake that we may not be able to in the original. But the circumstance that Audrey's in the remake sort of reinforces why you should care about the Seymour and Audrey relationship. There's actual sort of tension there. There's an actual problem that needs to be surmounted. Whereas in the original, hey, he works at the shop and kind of likes the owner's daughter. That's it.
True. We could just talk about Audrey now, if you
Yeah,
want.
I think you're right. We can just jump into Audrey because in the remake, the tension that I'm sort of alluding to is that Audrey is in an abusive relationship already. And, she comes to the shop with black eyes. Her arm gets messed up at times. And it's very obvious very early in the movie that she's in a bad relationship. And it gives you a framework to makes you want to root for her, Rick Moranis' version of Seymour, because we know she's with a bad guy. And conversely, we would like to see her with a good guy we presume that's who Seymour represents in this scenario. Yeah, and this Audrey has a lot more character in the remake. She has this very specific style. She almost reminds me of Pinky from Grease. I don't know, just the way she talks. I can't quite emulate it, but she's got kind of has like high pitched sort of.
It's a very high pitched, soft voice that she has. Yes, definitely.
She comes across at all times as like because of just her general demeanor as like a damsel in distress.
Yeah, she comes across as like very fragile. Like she's very skinny. She's got that very faint, high pitched voice, and then she's in this abusive relationship. You feel like she'd get broken at like any second, which I think makes you just root even more for her and Seymour to happen because, oh my God, this poor girl. There's no way she can handle any more abuse.
She sort of resigned herself to this abuse as well. Like she feels that she isn't deserving of something better in life. That gets verbalized a lot throughout the film. And both characters, both Seymour and Audrey, have that same sort of feeling that neither one of them thinks that they deserve better. And again, it reinforces that, hey, we should root for these people. In the original, Audrey...
What can you say about her?
Yeah, exactly. I feel like we say this a decent amount about female characters in the original movies. They're just there.
Yeah, true.
I guess in that sense, I'm glad that film has evolved and that we've, made more space for interesting female characters. That particular movie, this is not the case. Audrey is more or less Seymour's cheerleader for no reason at all.
Yeah, you nailed it right there.
She's rooting for the guy, even when he really isn't redeemable. Like he's bad at his job, so no. Why should he still be there? He's a klutz. He's a pushover, and she's still always like encouraging him, which I guess is nice, and I can see why Seymour likes her. But why does she like Seymour? That's the mystery for me.
Yeah, and they even have this date, which is not romantic at all. It's pretty awkward. Again, I know it's a comedy, but from an audience point of view, you don't understand why she's like fine with it or like why she's into him at all. Like you can see why he would like her, but I just can't see why she would reciprocate at all. I know it's a comedy, but not getting anything from her point of view.
Only thing that kind of maybe helps me with that is that I guess he fits into sort of a caregiver role, which I guess would be more important at the time because he helps his mother. The success that he's found with the plant. It seems that like a lot of the women in the movie, once he becomes sort of famous and more successful, are into him because for whatever reason, Seymour in that original film gets a bit of a fan club. Is it weird that they're like local, like, well, I was going to say they were high schools, but I don't think they actually are.
I think I was thinking they were college girls. That's what I was hoping.
Because they were talking about the Rose Parade. So
yeah, but they're significantly younger than him, at least,
Yeah, you get that aspect where it's like he's got this group of like co-eds that are like obsessed with him. Maybe there's maybe there's more to this guy than he appears, but overall I'm not seeing it.
Not at all. It's everybody's fascination with him is very superficial. Like nobody really cares about the Seymour himself. They just care because he's like famous and everything. Like I said, it's a comedy, so I kind of went with it. I didn't really question it too much. I guess just going back to Audrey. Yeah, she didn't really do much in the original. It could have been anybody, really. It could have been another dude at the shop, just like being his cheerleader, like help. Hey, come on, this is my good buddy Seymour. Don't you want to see his plant in the basement? The love story was it wasn't good. It wasn't really good in the original.
That wasn't good, and there's not an equivalent character in the next film, but like Seymour's mother in the original really doesn't like her. I don't know what that is. Could be just sort of like this weird jealous maternal thing, but she's constantly trying to drive him away from Audrey, and there's not really a lot of pushback to sort of counteract that. So again, the whole relationship, like you mentioned, feels sort of shoehorned in, even though it's supposed to be a major factor.
Well, I don't know if it's supposed to be a major factor. Like, I know it's a major factor in the remake, but maybe that's just not what they were going for in the original. Maybe they were trying to show that, hey, your stupid romance movies are dumb, because look, this could be a romance thing. I'm not exactly sure. Those two characters and their romantic story are definitely done much better in the remake.
No questions there. I agree with you 100% because I don't remember Audrey much from the first film.
Gotta agree with that. Which character should we go to? I guess the third piece of the Mushnick shop.
Oh, yeah.
All right, so we got Mr. Mushnick here. Oh, maybe I should just briefly say, too, the Audrey in the original was played by Jackie Joseph, and in the remake, she's played by Ellen Greene. Ellen Greene, who actually played Audrey in the off-Broadway production, so she got to reprise her role in the movie. And I think she was the only actor from the Broadway play that was brought into the movie. So let's go on to Mushnick. Mushnick was played by Mel Wells in the original, and Vincent Gardenia in the remake.
Mr. Mushnick in both films are extremely similar characters. In the original and the remake, you're talking about a shop owner. He's a florist on Skid Row. Like, that doesn't seem very lucrative, and it obviously isn't very lucrative at the beginning of the films. You can tell that for both characters, money is their major motivation.
Yep.
I would say in the original, at least on the front end, that's even more apparent that like he really pretty much just cares about the money. The other characters really don't factor into his equation other than firing him so that he doesn't have to pay them anymore.
Yeah, he's pretty much the same until the end, sort of.
Yeah, and, I wasn't trying to jump there, but I think you almost have to.
I think we have to because they are so similar. So I guess I'll just get into it. Both Mr. Mushnicks see Seymour with body parts, but one decides he's going to sort of blackmail him. Or first he's going to take him to the authorities, then he decides to kind of blackmail him. And that Mr. Mushnick dies in the remake. So we have one Mushnick who lives the entire movie, and we have one that dies. Yeah. What did you think about that decision to kill off this character?
I think killing off the character made things, I don't know, well, I guess because the musical doesn't really have to contend with some of the same consequences because of the genre. I thought it actually made things a little bit messier for me. I guess you're getting sort of a problem out of the way. Let's put it this way. The two films are approaching the disappearances, the deaths, different. We'll start there because in the original film, you basically have like a detective's voiceover at the beginning. And when he discovers the body parts, you have that voiceover again in the original where they're saying, at this point, Mr. Mushnick could have come to the authorities and maybe things would have ended differently. You don't have that same sort of backdrop in the remake. Mm-hmm. And the way that characters disappear, killing off Mushnick there, I don't know. Maybe I'm comparing it too much to the original because I felt like we could have got more out of that character. But his turn to me was really interesting. Just how kind of like evil he got.
Yeah, right?
He was a greedy guy in both films. But there was more caring about Seymour in the original. He tried to help him out the entire time. Where in the remake, he was like, well, here's my opportunity. I saw something horrific, and it seems like I'm going to do the right thing and take you to the cops. But actually, this is my opportunity to, like, blackmail you. I'll take the plant, you go on the run, and I'll get the fame, I'll get the money. Which, I guess, by the logic of the new film, because pretty much everyone that dies, save one person, kind of deserves it, I guess, in that standpoint. Whereas in the original, it wasn't really about deserving dying or not. People just kind of died.
Yeah, it was a little weird. I did like Mushnick in the original. Thought he was one of the more interesting, more developed characters, actually. And to see him take that turn in the remake, it did confused me a little bit, and I was completely shocked to see him die. Yeah, I didn't entirely agree with it, but I think I understand why they did it. Because instead of introducing a new character, you're gonna have one of your main characters die just to raise the stakes to show that, well, this guy died. Anybody can die now. I think that's what they were going for. And then when we talk about the original ending for the remake, I think his death makes a lot more sense when you talk about it in those terms.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat where it's like I don't agree with the choice, but like you said, I understand it. It sort of goes counter to the story that Seymour is telling in the remake about how he got to the plant shop. Which seems more of like a charitable thing that was happening there. But in that context, was it or was this always about sort of exploiting Seymour? Was that what was happening the whole time? It puts an edge on a character that I don't think needed it.
Yeah, it didn't. Because he is kind of this goofy owner that doesn't really know how to save his own business. And to have him turn that evil that he needed to be killed by the plant. Yeah, it was a little bit of a shocker. And yeah, I'll say it again. I didn't really agree with it.
Yeah, I'm trying not to let my my viewing of the original sort of taint my viewing of the remake, but it does because it is a stronger character from the original film. The way things play out in that original film with him, when basically the cops find out what Seymour had done, he tries to help. He tries to help Seymour, and it makes him an endearing character where he is a flawed person. He's a flawed character, but in this moment, the chance where he gets to be a human, he does sort of the right thing, as it were. And in this other opportunity, like, all right, same thing. You've got this greedy sort of character. He's over the top. He's almost a caricature. And then when he gets a chance to like maybe do the right thing, he immediately flips it into, no, I'm going to do the exact wrong thing here. And I'm going to try to cover up a murder for my own personal gain. The stakes become exceedingly high, which, as you mentioned, it does show you that a major character can die, but I think at the expense of sort of the audience being behind that character at any point in the film.
Yeah, so Mr. Mushnick, he's one of the characters, and I definitely have to give the edge to the original. I liked what they did with him more there.
I agree. The original Mr. Mushnick, I can't even imagine a movie without him in the original. Because I don't know how you get to anything.
No, he carried so much in the original.
Like, I don't think you get anything done without Mr. Mushnick in the original, which is probably why I'm kind of holding it so close to the chest. That, like,
yeah,
I'm not a fan of him getting killed off in the remake, but he's less of an important piece in the remake, which I think is why they were willing to sacrifice him.
Yeah.
But I don't know. Like you said, the nod to the original for that particular character.
Yeah. That turn really does come out of nowhere. Maybe if he had one of those songs that everybody else had, he never had a solo song. That's the problem. If he had one of those songs talking about what his number one goal is, and if it was greed and getting wealthy, then I would have been more on board with his sudden death. But since he was kind of a background character in the remake, his turn really was, huh?
Yeah. You know what? Because it's so easy to focus on the remake. I will say this, that Mel Wells, his turn from actually seeing the body parts, I really like that scene in the original film.
Yeah, I really like that too, because it's like you're put in this awkward situation where you want to talk to somebody about this subject that you don't want to talk about, so you're sort of hinting around it, and like, I hope you say it because I don't want to say it. Can you say it? They really have a good back and forth at that moment. Yeah,
it's like ghosts I can handle, but this. And when he's asking, like, bring me tequila, vodka, creme de...
that was great. Yeah, he was out to dinner and he ordered every drink. Oh, it's so good.
Again, it's a great scene because it plays off of... You don't get a lot of backstory for the original characters, but it does play off the fact that, like, he's definitely known around town for, like, skipping out on payment for things. And the waitress wasn't having it. She was like, you need to go get money from the shop. So you get more background into him and sort of his financial situation, which we know is dire, but that's really hammered home in that scene. He sees, obviously, one of the craziest things you could possibly see. He doesn't know how to mentally deal with it. And his reaction is, I'm going to go exactly back to where I just was. I'm gonna basically try to buy any form of alcohol they have, and all right, I can't pay for it. Just take my watch because you know what?
Because I've seen some
It's a rough
shit.
night. Yeah,
Yeah.
Mr. Mushkin has seen some shit in the remake, and again, that one, minor scene, but for that original film, major scene actually gives you just all this insight, all this fun playoff, and I think that's why I like the character so much in the original.
Yeah.
Whereas the remake, it's like, yeah, he saw something, and now he's threatening people, and he's willing to, cross the line, as it were. So he loses a lot of appeal for you there.
Wholeheartedly agree. Let's go on to the other character who resides in the shop, our Audrey plants. So in the original, it's Audrey Jr., who is voiced by Charles B. Griffith, the screenplay writer. And then we have Audrey 2 in the remake, voiced by Levi Stubbs from The Four Tops. I love that song, Sugar Pie Honey Bunch. I used to play that on repeat all the time. Just throwing that out there before we get into comparisons.
Good jam.
One of my favorites. All right, so Audrey Jr. versus Audrey 2.
The movie, very early on in the remake, makes a big deal. You can see in sort of like the opening scroll that this Audrey 2 is important. They put a lot of effort and a lot of resources into making the Audrey 2 work. Visually, of course, Audrey 2 is just a much more interesting plant to look at.
Yeah.
It's actually pretty incredible. And from a personality standpoint, which again, even in this film, the plant has way more personality. He's singing, he's dancing, for a plant. And Levi Stubbs does an incredible job with the voice acting on this. He plays a great musical villain. The original film, Audrey Jr., it's okay, Visually, I guess for the time, it's impressive what they were able to pull off, but it's not even close.
It doesn't hold a candle to what they could do with puppeteering in 1986.
Well, not at all. And the major kind of turn for the plant being able to speak. They do so much more with it in the remake because obviously, again, with it being a musical, not only does it speak, it sings, and it's an alien, which is super cool too. I like that in the original. Seymour has more of a role in the fact that Audrey Jr. exists. He's cross-pollinating plants, and that's interesting. But you're not going to beat that the plant came from space during a total eclipse of the moon.
Yeah, with that beautiful musical number again, which I love.
And every once in a while, a Chinese shopkeeper is going to sell you a strange plant.
He might sell you a plant, might sell you a mogwai. Hey, you never know.
You just never know in your 80s film what a shopkeep of Chinese descent will do.
I know. They sold some crazy shit in the 80s, those Chinese shops.
But yeah, no, you're right. The song's incredible. Great intro. And yeah, I mean, from the beginning, Audrey 2. I guess there's a reason it's Audrey 2. Audrey 2 is the much more impressive Audrey. No question.
Wholeheartedly agree. The voice of Audrey Jr. in the original, Charles B. Griffith, wasn't even supposed to be the original voice. He just did those voiceovers on set, and I guess over time, the director or whoever was editing it just got so used to it. They're like, all right, we'll just keep the same voice. There's not a lot of personality with the voice. It's kind of just this deep, dominating, you will feed me. Come on, feed me, Seymour. And then you got Levi Stubbs, which is, come on, Seymour, you gotta give me some food, Yeah. It's such personality, such a pep in that voice,
So good.
It's a classic character in that remake, that's for sure.
He's a bad mama, he's a tough guy, but
No, it's still impressive by today's standards what they did in that film, because again, no CGI, it's completely puppeteered, or is that a word, puppeteered? They're puppeteering the Audrey 2, and the original, while still impressive, I guess, for what they could do in the 60s, a lot of the times the mouth didn't even match when Audrey Jr. was speaking. Sometimes the mouth would move and nothing would come out, and then the mouth would stop moving, and then Audrey would be speaking. It's like you couldn't even sync up the voice a little bit better. I mean, I know we rushed production here, but come on, come on, Corman. Let's just move that voice over a little earlier so it matches the mouth moving.
Yeah, it wasn't really their priority at the time.
No.
The one aspect I guess that I thought was interesting for the original one was the whole hypnotism thing. I thought that was strange.
That was interesting. Yeah.
It kind of creates a dynamic. I'll say this that because we're talking about Audrey and we can Audrey Jr., which again I do like. I think Audrey Jr. is funnier than Audrey 2. Like to name something Junior after the mom. I thought that shit was hilarious. But Audrey Jr. in that moment made Seymour do something, but a lot of it was Seymour sort of making these choices on his own. The hypnotism, I think, kind of took away some. I mean, clearly took away some of Seymour's agency in what was happening, which makes sort of the end for Seymour more tragic. In the remake, they really do shy away from Rick Moranis's Seymour really initiating the deaths. Like it all is kind of like circumstantial. Like he's not really the one, quote unquote, pulling the trigger.
Yeah.
In those scenes, and Audrey 2 is just more bombastic, has more personality, and that's how he does influence. Like it's more like the personality can convince you to try to do something you normally wouldn't do.
Yeah.
And preyed on Seymour's weaknesses.
Exactly. The stronger mind convincing the weaker mind to do things.
Absolutely. We're Audrey Jr. like to take it to the level where you're getting sleepy. I thought that was a little. I thought that was strange.
It was strange, and it didn't help the way Seymour acted after he was hypnotized too. His behavior was just bizarre. I guess it was bizarre, and what we know about hypnosis, and I guess the science of hypnosis, if you could say that, and just how it works and everything. It didn't quite work. It was pretty awkward, and we'll talk about that a little bit more.
One pussy hooker.
We'll talk about her death and everything a little bit more when we talk about the unique deaths. Yeah, overall, got to give it to Audrey too. It's not even close. It's like still so impressive, and the way they filmed it was, I was reading it, and Frank Oz obviously famous for puppeteering Yoda in what was it, Star Wars? Is that, you ever heard of that, Empire Strikes Back? And no, the way they got Audrey 2 to move like so quick and like naturally is they just filmed at half speed. Audrey 2 would just say the lines and it would be slower, and then when they sped it up, it would look like Audrey 2 is moving so fast. So it's hats off to everybody who worked on the movements of Audrey 2, because it still stands up today. Good job.
Yeah, because I was watching it, and to your point, I never really made a mental note to myself to like, this looks crappy. Yeah. A lot of times with like CGI, even recent CGI, some of these remakes, you're just like, gross.
Yeah.
I didn't really think about it, like about the character. I was like, wow, this looks good, and that was it. Whereas like you could be watching something like Game of Thrones, and then you watch an early enough season, you're like, man, that direwolf doesn't look right. Somehow they pulled off this amazing puppet, and it was worth the investment.
Absolutely. Yeah, I had to remind myself, like, that's not really a plant talking. There's a lot of people working to make that puppet move, so that I think a man is really talking to a plant. It's one of the most impressive puppeteering performances I've ever seen in a movie. All right, so Audrey 2 gets the edge there, is what it sounds like. Let's go on to another character that was in both movies. I'm going to go to the dentist. Let's talk about the dentist.
I'm glad that we're at this point.
We can kind of complete the circle on Audrey here also. So we have in the original John Herman Shaner as the dentist. And in the remake, we have, of course, Steve Martin. I'm just, spoiler alert, Steve Martin kicks ass as the dentist in this movie.
Man, does he.
Oh my god. I couldn't stop smiling every time he was on screen. It was just watching him chew up the scenery at this kind of Elvis-y dentist who loves inflicting pain on patients. It was a phenomenal performance by Steve Martin.
Yeah, and when you talk about the music in the film, I mean, besides Little Shop of Horrors, which, like you mentioned, even though I'd never seen the films, instantly recognized that. Thought it was great.
Yeah, some be a dentist.
That's man, that's such a funny song.
Yeah, it's great.
That is like the height of musical comedy, in my opinion, because it's just the character. He's a complete sadist.
Yeah,
and like his mom's like in the music and the songs, like noticing that
Yeah, he's like torturing animals or something.
he's nuts,
Borderline serial killer behavior.
completely. And to have like his mother be like, you know what you should do? You should get this.
Just brings it over the top. Brings it over
It's
the
the
top.
funniest dentist joke outside of Seinfeld.
Yeah. Outside of a stickle of fluoride.
Man, that song is great. I had no problem with the length of that song.
Oh, no. Because, again, it was one of those more visually interesting things happening during the music, right? It was amazingly choreographed, especially when he first walks in and, like, just takes off his badass motorcycle leather jacket, and then you see that he's actually a dentist, and then just, like, everything that's happening in that waiting room is just so interesting to watch.
And again, this scene actually shows you the strength of doing the comedy as a musical.
Yes, absolutely.
You can't punch out a nurse and have it be funny unless it's in the context of musical choreography.
Yeah, it worked 100%. That was an improv by Steve Martin, or a suggestion by him, at least.
Well, he's a comedic genius, so it makes sense. The whole thing, I mean, the lyrics, the choreography, now spit, like the whole, it's a great song. It's an awesome character, and it takes a character who, by normal standards, would have no redeeming qualities. Like, we're talking about a guy who beats up his girl regularly, and we're like, he's my favorite guy.
No.
like again, just the power of a musical.
Yeah. One of my favorite character introductions in a movie I've ever seen in a long time. Was hands down.
Oh yeah, like you said, like I could feel myself smiling.
Yeah, right.
I was like, this is awesome. More of this, please.
Steve Martin, perfectly cast as the dentist. And then we have the original, right?
Oh yeah.
All right, there was an original dentist.
We did watch another dentist, didn't we?
John Herman Shaner tried, obviously not given as much depth or as much to do as Steve Martin. He didn't have an amazing musical number. He didn't have an intro. He didn't have anything. All he did was torture. I think we only saw him torture the one patient, maybe two. He doesn't really have anything to do in the original. And like we said, in the remake, he's not only this terrible person, but he's also dating Audrey in the remake. He does not have a relationship with her at all in the original.
The only sort of tension or issue in the original is that Seymour kind of messed up his plans. He wants to inflict pain on Seymour because his gardenias got messed up.
It's stupid.
Just not obviously not nearly as important or fleshed out as in the remake.
It's a comedy, though. I guess I could see that in the 60s. Oh, man, this guy is so angry over some flowers being messed up. So I could see it working, but obviously the motivation to get rid of him in the remake is much stronger.
Absolutely. I will say that, like you mentioned, we get to sort of complete the Aubrey arc by talking about the remake doctor, dentist as it were. The original...
No. Doctor.
Still laughing.
Plus, he's saying it with this Elvis accent. Oh, it's great.
From like a musical standpoint, kind of reminds me of like the Meatloaf character in
Oh yeah, and Rocky Horror.
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. I was totally getting those vibes.
But I don't know, just so freaking good. But,
definitely one of the highlights of the movie.
Absolutely, the original Doctor actually helps us kind of complete the Seymour arc, because this is the first time where, yes, he says you know it's kind of self-defense that the Doctor made him do it, but we see Seymour actually take somebody out here.
Oh wait, but how does he do it? Isn't there some type of fight, Reggie?
Yeah, they both get like little scalpels out, and they have like a mini duel.
Was it little teeth drills or something? I wasn't exactly sure what they were fighting with.
We didn't talk about this. We probably should have. The black and white element.
Okay, right. Before we get more into these characters, right? The original is in black and white. The remake isn't obviously in color, made in the 80s. They did colorize the original, and just for everybody listening, you watched the colorized version, and I watched the black and white.
Right, which is why I think we didn't bring this up before, because I did watch it in color. To me, it looked like they took, which I don't even know why you'd have a scalpel. That's what it kind of looked like to me, but maybe, you're right, maybe it was a drill or something like that. A little ambiguous. The tool was very tiny, which was what the joke was.
Yeah.
You're
It's a
like,
comedy, huh?
funny stuff. But it actually reminded me of something else I liked about the remake, which is gonna happen a lot when we're talking about the Doctor character here. But you do see in the original Seymour actually stab the Doctor. He does that consciously. There's no ambiguity there. He now truly has blood in his hands more so than before, and I think it changes the dynamic between the two films as to sort of who Seymour is as a person. Although that did just remind me that in the remake, Steve Martin's tools are antiques and very dull, which I thought was funny as well. Just I'm always going to find something fun that I like about that Steve Martin.
It's great. Yeah, so you have Seymour actually kill in the original, and in the remake, Steve Martin sort of commit suicide because he needs laughing gas to perform on the Seymour in the remake. So it's like, okay, you're still sort of on Seymour's side, I guess, at that point, because he's not killing anybody, he's just bringing bodies.
Right. I think that was very likely a conscious choice for the remake.
Yeah, you want to make Seymour as likable as possible, especially if you want the audience rooting for both him and Audrey to not only succeed, but to get together. Yeah.
Right. So even though he may have went there with the intention of killing, you kind of know that Seymour isn't actually capable of that.
Yeah, which, again, the remake got pretty dark, because, like, all of a sudden, Seymour in the remake just has a gun. And it's like, especially living in America today, with our gun violence issues, it's like, wow, he just has a gun out of nowhere. Just like Mr. Mushnick had a gun out of nowhere in the remake. So, a lot of random guns in the remake.
A lot of random guns for some reason. Two different portrayals. Again, that's sort of shows you how much personality the Steve Martin character has. That we're talking about his relation to a bunch of different characters and how he affects the film itself, whether it's Audrey's motivation or Seymour's motivation. In the original, it didn't really have much to do with the motivation, but we did see how far Seymour could take it. Clearly, we know who we think is the better Doctor.
Yeah,
in this case,
hands down. Obviously, the edge to Steve Martin. Even if you just don't want to watch either movie, anybody that's listening, just watch Steve Martin's musical number. It's a delight. I highly recommend it. Also, not only do we have two dentists in each movie, or a dentist in each movie, but we also have very famous patients to each of the dentists. And I would just want to go into them just because of who plays each of the patients in each movie. They both play the same character, but they have different names in each film. So we have enthusiastic patient Wilbur Force in the original, portrayed by Jack Nicholson. And then in the remake, we have Arthur Denton, portrayed by Bill Murray. Both kind of out of nowhere cameos in their respective movies. Okay. So I don't know if we need to necessarily compare them, or if we just want to talk about, like, oh my god, look who's in these movies.
Yes, it's pretty much, oh my god, look who's in these movies. They're, like you said, two different names, but effectively the same character. Yeah. It's kind of the foil here. It's the guy who actually likes pain.
Right.
So you got the sadist, and now you have the masochist. Completing the arc. And
rock an immovable object, or right, an unstoppable force and immovable object. Right, here we go. Which one's gonna win out?
Exactly. In the original, the Jack Nicholson character who enjoys pain, but we do get to see a different character actually performing surgeries or dental work on them. Oh, because at this point in the original, Seymour's already killed the dentist. So he's the one actually doing the dental work on Jack Nicholson, which doesn't change much about the joke of the scene of liking pain, but it does sort of change the dynamic when we're talking about comparing the two films.
Oh, shit. Did we talk about how exactly the dentist died in the original?
They got into a duel and he killed him. I mean,
but he just kind of died. Like in the version I saw, the black and white one, I didn't really see the fatal blow, I suppose. So,
yeah, you don't really see it.
You don't really see it. He just hits him with the drill/scalpel and he dies.
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. Okay. So again, it's a comedy. You're just supposed to go with it because they had this ridiculous thing that was like a play on a sword fight, and then one of them got hit with the quote unquote sword, and the other guy died. Okay.
Yep.
Comedy. Okay.
Comedy.
Anyway, so like you said, Seymour is performing on Jack Nicholson, who is definitely playing a role you're probably not familiar with Jack playing, just this really enthusiastic kind of go-getter that, like you said, is kind of this guy who loves pain. And then we got Bill Murray in the remake, and pretty much playing the same role, just like, yeah, I need a long, hard drill or something, doctor.
Yeah.
But it is not Seymour in the remake who performs the surgery. It is our famous dentist, and he just gets so fed up with him that he's not running out of the surgery like these other patients. So he just gets fed up with him and just kicks him out. Just, again, small sort of cameo roles.
Funny beat though, in both films.
Yeah.
Very funny beat.
I think it like really works too, because like I know Jack Nicholson, it's Jack Nicholson, but like Bill Murray, like in sort of the zeitgeist of our culture, he's pretty up there too right now. So just to have these really famous guys, which are much more famous now than they were then. Right? Even though Bill Murray did it after Ghostbusters, I still feel like he's done so many more movies to like really grow in his following. So it's pretty cool to see these two huge actors do this really small cameo in a movie that you probably would never see them do again.
No, I completely agree. For both of them, as we know them in the zeitgeist now, in such a small scene, relatively, it'd be so funny, and such a memorable part of the movie. It's a cool dynamic, and I'm glad that it sort of played out like that in both films.
Yeah, and they both live, so hey.
They both lived, and one lived long enough to piss off Steve Martin. Like, just him being like, "Get out of here, you're sick." Again, it's funny.
So do we want to maybe discuss the endings? That's another huge difference in both films.
Yeah, I think we've hit that point.
So we'll probably get in more depth with the remake, since the remake has sort of two different endings, but I'll just do a brief synopsis on both endings. So in the original, Seymour's kind of fed up with what Audrey Jr.'s been doing, and decides to take matters into his own hands. And you just see him kind of go into Audrey with an axe, and you don't exactly know what's happened. You just know that they're going to have a fight, and then later Audrey and who's with Audrey at that point? Is his mom?
Well, the mom, yeah, Audrey and the mom.
Audrey and the mom. Okay, so they both show up to the shop, and they see that this is something unique to the original, is that the faces of all the victims show up on like flowers of the Audrey Jr., and you could see their faces perfectly, and you can see Seymour's face among them. So Seymour lost that battle. He went in there with an axe with good intentions to destroy Audrey Jr., and his plans failed, and he's now part of the plan.
What makes that ending interesting in the original is that at this point, because as you mentioned, you see the faces in the plants, when it was supposed to be sort of Seymour's big moment, he was going to get a trophy and his life was going to change, presumably for the better. It's discovered the dark things that he's done. Like, you see the face of all these characters that have died, whether it's the random dude at the train tracks or the dentist or the random hooker that was trying to, all these random people that he killed for dubious reasons are shown, and he's basically, his life's over. Like, he's on the run from the law, and he goes back when he can and tries to take Audrey Jr. out with the axe, and like you mentioned, he loses, and you get that kind of creepy moment at the end where you see his face in the buds, and he's like, I forget his exact word, but he's like apologizing.
Yeah, I was just going to say he's going to say, I'm sorry or something.
I'll say this because that is unique to the film. The effect may not have been done to the level that you see it today, but that's creepy as hell, man.
Oh, yeah.
That is dark stuff, man.
It does. It is pretty dark. Yeah, I totally forgot to mention that, like, he was exposed in front of the flower unveiling ceremony and the cops chased him. But yeah, that's an interesting way for a comedy to end. It's such a dark note like that, where your main protagonist is not only dead, but like sort of imprisoned in a plant for the rest of his life.
Yeah. It's such a downer ending to what was mostly just kind of like a romp, It was just like, all right, goofy things happening here, goofy thing happening there. I guess for audiences, you may accept it because this Seymour kind of crossed the line. I still ultimately think he's a victim more or less than a bad guy, but he's done enough, I guess, bad on his own that maybe that ending is more acceptable than in the remake, where I don't think he could do the same thing at all.
I think maybe it's supposed to play against expectations, where you see him going in the plant with the axe, and you expect when they walk in that he's going to be standing over this destroyed plant, but instead he gets eaten. Yuck, yuck. He didn't do
Yeah.
it. I don't, that's what I assume they're just doing. A lot of you expect this to happen because it happened in these other movies that you've seen before, but nope. This is our hero is dead, huh?
And fade.
And fade. And as opposed to the ending we have in the remake, which I'll discuss the theatrical ending, which is what they changed it to after the original. Anyway, so Seymour again goes to confront the plant, wants to get rid of it because the plant actually calls up Audrey, who Seymour proclaimed his love for, and they were going to get married. And Audrey goes over, and the plant starts eating Audrey. And Seymour walks in just at the right moment and is able to pull her out. And then there's a huge fight. Pretty good special effects again, like especially when those the stems from the plant were like just going into the walls at different points. That was pretty cool, and it's popping up through the floors. Really good special effects. And you see the axe. I think that was a nod to the original. So if you've seen the original, you think, oh, Seymour's going to get the axe. But Seymour does not get the axe. Audrey, too, destroys more of the shop. A lot of the shop collapses. And there's these exposed electrical wires. So Seymour takes the electrical wires and electrocutes the Audrey, too, who also has, like, little tiny Audreys singing along because it's of course it's to a musical number, which is great. And ultimately Seymour succeeds. Audrey 2 dies, and then Audrey and Seymour live happily ever after in her fairy tale dream, with a little caveat because there is another Audrey 2 in their garden at the very end. So the more happy ending, where you actually see our protagonists live together, but there is danger in their future because they have one of the plants with them.
I think maybe I should jump into kind of what the original ending was going to be.
Okay, yeah, go ahead. With the original for the remake, you mean?
Just for the audience, the cut that I watched was not the theatrical cut. So, a lot of what you're describing, I remember seeing elements of it, but that ending is completely different than what I ultimately ended up seeing because I had more of a director's cut.
And I just want to say before you go into that, the reason they changed it is because they did a test screening, and apparently you need like 55% approval for the studio to make the movie. And I think with that original ending, which you're about to describe, they only got like 15%.
It was like 13.
It was pretty low. So it wasn't the ending that Frank Oz and company wanted. It wasn't creatively satisfying for them to do the theatrical ending, but that's what the studio and the crowd wanted back then. So
yeah,
go on, describe it for the folks.
Absolutely. You kind of pick up in the same spot where Audrey 2 has called Audrey and she's gone down to the shop, and you get the same thing where it's like mid sort of getting eaten. Seymour discovers him. I think in this case he actually does use the axe to actually free her from the plant. It actually fed back into the humor of the film because he's able to free Audrey from the plant, but then like she's just kind of sitting there and she looks fine, but she's like, I'll surely die soon. and like it's so funny.
She says that?
Yeah, basically like she's like sitting there, she looks like fine, like maybe like someone that just fainted or something, and she's just laying there and she's like, Seymour, I can tell I'm just it's almost over for me. I'm surely good. Which is, again, for what would be a sad scene, it was actually pretty funny. Like the humor there was really, really good. And then she basically sacrificed herself. She's like, although I'm dying, like this wasn't part of the plan. You should feed me to the plant, because like that's ultimately what the plan wanted, to be fed. And like I could still be part of your plan. I could still be with you in that way because she'll help him get more fame and more money and let him live a better life. It sort of solidifies their arc in a sort of tragic way, which is cute. But then the plant, Seymour goes after the plant. He's like, basically like, screw you, buddy. He's going to finish the job, and the plant eats him. Yeah. What may not have been in the theatrical version, I don't think that you had the scene where the guy from the beginning, the kind of chipper guy that says, wow, it's an interesting plant.
Oh, Christopher Guest, famous director, actor Christopher Guest.
Yes, sir. Well, and correct me if I'm wrong. I don't think in the theatrical version you have a scene towards the end with him and
No, he's not in the end at all.
So in the director's cut, after the plant sort of like kind of like eats his girlfriend, we haven't really got to the part where he's trying to like kill the plant. The guy like reveals that he's taken a sample from Audrey 2 and made his own Audrey 2s, and he's like a marketing guy. So he's like, we're gonna get these in every household in America. Rick Moranis realizes that the plant's evil and that the plan all along was to like basically spread itself out and like take over the planet more or less. So that Seymour's trying to stop that plan, and he dies while that happens. And then ultimately, all of these Audrey 2s get sold across America, and they basically take over. It's literally melee. Like the plants take over like New York City, and you see giant Audrey 2s like crushing buildings and terrorizing people and stuff like that. It's a very, very, again, for such a dark scene, it's a very fun scene. Because the song basically is subsequent to the events you just witnessed was how the song goes, basically. After Rick Moranis' character dies, it's like subsequent to the events that you just witnessed, and they explain how the Audrey plants populated the planet and like took shit over. It's incredible. But I could see audience at the time being sad because, hey, I thought those two were going to get together and not die and have like all of New York get destroyed by giant plants. But it's a pretty kick-ass ending, in my opinion.
So, do you think, in your opinion of the remake, which ending do you like more?
I think, and again, this is, without me seeing what happened, just hearing what you described, it sounds like you actually had a pretty fun musical number there that I didn't get to see.
That's where he explains that he's an alien. That's where you first hear the admittance, like, oh, I'm an alien.
Okay, so that's kind of how they reveal he's an alien, as opposed to in the other one, Seymour realizes that this guy that's trying to like basically get rich off of selling more Audrey 2s, he's realizing that was Audrey 2's plan the whole time. That's how he finds out it's an alien, and there's a whole song sequence with that too. But no, I mean, from what I saw in tone of the movie, I'm assuming that the director's cut, just based on your description, I'm assuming the director's cut is the much more interesting ending, and I think it fits the film more.
That makes sense to me. And it obviously fits the original more, because your Seymour is dead. The original ending is based off the off-Broadway musical. That's why they filmed it, because that's what the off-Broadway musical did. So they had to redo their own. So what you see in the theaters was not what you would have seen off-Broadway.
Staying true to the original sort of subject, staying true to the tone of the original film as well, where the original film, you have this dark, kind of tragic ending. And in this film, you do still have the same dark, tragic ending, but there's so much comedy and this, like, truly horrible thing that's happening. Like, aliens have invaded all of Earth. And there's giant plants destroying New York City and eating people. And, like, there's explosions and just... It's a pretty long sequence, too. Like, they really get into the New York destruction. But I think, like, if there is a message to the film, I think that it's captured more in the ending that the director intended. It's a lot of fun, and it just more camp in a film that's very campy.
Again, it's also more true to the original. I wouldn't mind if they had kept.
You might want to check it out.
Yeah, I definitely will after this. Just, I'm sure I could check it out on YouTube somewhere.
Yeah, and I'm going to check out the ending that you described because, again, there's this sort of sappy part of me that likes the fact that it ends well for them, but
of course.
At the same time, like, I wasn't that invested in the characters, and I thought, like, kind of the star of the film is the plant.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's, like, that was the plan. The plant, even in the beginning of the film, describes like where the plant came from, and it makes sense to me. It makes sense that the plant's plan succeeded, especially if you had like Seymour and Mr. McCanish and stuff as his adversaries. Of course, the plant won.
Yeah, and I think again it's less cliche that original director's ending, because it's just like the original movie, like we said, like, oh, Seymour's got his big moment, he's got the axe, he's going to kill the plant. No, he died and becomes part of the plant. It would have been, again, more in line with the original if they had gone with the now Audrey 2 has taken over the entire world It would have been a bold move. And I think, in general, I just would enjoy it because, as opposed to the cliche ending of like, oh, they live happily ever after. I mean, it's not exactly happily ever after because there is like still an Audrey 2 in their garden. I feel like they probably had to fight for it. Like, they can't just be happy. They have to have. There has to be some sense of danger here. We need to play on the typical happy ending somehow. Yeah, I kind of feel for Frank Oz. Like, yeah, this. I wish we could stuck with the original ending.
When you are talking about remake territory and you can't always get what you want when you're talking about trying to release a Hollywood film, especially
Yeah.
the 80s blockbusters were huge, and you got to play the audience there because that wasn't like an indie film. A lot of money and investment went
No.
into it.
It was
And,
pretty. It was. I think it was one of the most high budget films for that studio at the time.
makes sense. So if you're testing it and what was otherwise probably testing really well until the ending,
No,
like,
exactly. It was testing completely well until that ending came, and then everybody's like, "I don't know if I'd recommend it to people."
hey, you make the tough choices. I'm glad that I got to see sort of what they intended, but for us to even be sitting here talking about the film, there's got to be some commercial viability. So, yeah, although movies are art, they're also a business, and I get it.
Just going back to the comparisons of the two endings, I guess I'm gonna compare the theatrical ending to the originals.
I think
Yeah.
that's the fairest way to do this.
Yeah. Which one would I prefer? It's funny
I
because the characters are so different. So I don't mind the original Seymour getting devoured and becoming part of the plant. While in the remake, yeah, I kind of do like Seymour and Audrey ending up together just because of the time we spent with those characters and seeing that they did want to be together. So it's the cliche Hollywood ending. So I kind of like both endings because of the way I felt about the characters in their separate movies, if that makes any sense.
No, I think that totally makes sense to me because we spoke about it a bit during our comparisons. Those small tweaks make them different films. Of course, you're more okay with a Seymour that, yes, naive, yes, innocent, but not that innocent because he made the choice to kind of keep going out, and there were more deaths, which I think is a big difference. So he had more opportunities to do what he did, whether sometimes it was accidental or not. He's got multiple bodies under his count, so for him not in sort of you reap what you sow. Whereas that totally doesn't work in the remake. With the like you said, that theatrical ending makes sense for the arc that you're going through with those characters. Now I like the kind of crazy director's ending, but I like because of the effect. It wasn't really had anything to do with the story or anything. I just like,
Right.
oh shit, they got a giant plant like destroying New York. That's a crazy way to end a movie. I think that theatrical ending for an audience, especially one that paid hard-earned American cash, yeah, that makes sense.
It definitely, yeah, it definitely makes sense, especially since you gave so much time to those characters, like we said before, the musical numbers, right? They both had songs about how they want to be together or like about their futures. It's like, wait, you made me spend all this time with these characters and they're not going to end up together? I could see an audience being upset over that.
Especially, I mean, at the time, it wasn't like we're not in like the era of the gritty remake,
Right, yeah.
This is fluff, like early blockbusters when movies really started doing that bring the whole family down. Again, I like the crazy ending, but I also like you said, I like what you're describing. It sounds fine. There's still that element of danger there, but like everyone gets what they want.
I could see it being a little too dark, yeah. It's Rick Moranis, for Christ's sake, right? You don't need, he's harmless. We don't got to kill him.
Right.
Just from there, let's go on to the victims, because you had mentioned them a few times, even just describing the ending. So both of our movies had different victims that they fed to their respected Audrey plants.
Right.
The original got a homeless guy, a criminal, I guess a prostitute, and the dentist. While our remake only had the dentist and Mr. Mushnick.
And depending on what cut you saw.
Or maybe Seymour and Audrey too.
Right. Again, depending on what cut you saw.
What do you think, I guess, about the decision? Because I'm reading the list of the victims in the original. They're pretty much, they were only on screen to die. They weren't important characters. As opposed to the remake where, our dentist died in both, but Mr. Mushnick, which we kind of had gripes with anyway. Right. I'll let you start. What do you think about our victims?
I think they're not of much consequence, unfortunately. in terms of the film, because we'll recall that the dentist in the original film is certainly not important. He's also a side character that's really just there to die as well. He's much more fleshed out in the remake. I felt that the circumstances of Seymour discovering this horrible truth about the plant are just far more accidental at the beginning of the original film. Like he finds himself, trying to figure out what to do about his job. He's like tossing very big rocks around and accidentally hitting people in the head. And, he accidentally kills a guy. He doesn't know what to do with the body. And he's getting put into this strange.
Can we talk about that death scene? Because that was. We could talk about all the death scenes in the original because they were all like, oh, he died from that. I mean, obviously the homeless guy, he threw a rock. He was trying to hit a bottle. He hit the homeless guy. And then the homeless guy was stumbling around and then threw himself in front of a train, as you do when you get hit by a rock. So, okay, that was stupid, but I can get on board with that. Okay, because obviously he got hit by a train. Makes sense. And then we have the criminal who died. He was robbing the shop while Mr. Mushnick was in there. He kind of died the same way Mushnick did in the remake, coercing him to get closer to the plant, which is what happened in both films. So the criminal thought there was money in there in the original, and in the remake, Mushnick thought that, I don't know, he was just being tricked by Seymour. And then we have the girl and the dentist. We already talked about the dentist death, so we're going to talk about the prostitute.
Yeah.
And again, a rock.
Yeah. So, first of all, that scene is far too long.
Yeah. So Seymour's... At this point, he's hypnotized, and he's trying to find another body for the Audrey Jr. And this prostitute keeps showing up way ahead of Seymour. Like she shouldn't be there in any reality. Like she's just mysteriously popping up.
Very aggressive.
Yeah, which I guess is funny for a comedy.
Possibly.
And ultimately, he throws a rock just straight up in the air. It happens to land on her head, and she dies.
Yeah, I think there's some humor there because he's making kind of fun of that she's kind of skinny, and like there's this like joke about master
wants lots of fat or something.
Yeah, Audrey, like ha ha ha, I get it. She's skinny, which is she was fat for eating, blah blah blah. Then like for her to be like, oh, flip a coin. It's like I don't have a coin, and for him to like spit on a rock and then say, hey, wet side or dry side, throw it up in the air and then have it land on her head. It's preposterous.
It's not good. It doesn't work today. I'll say that.
Too many rocks,
Too many rocks. We already had a rock at the homeless guy. We can't do rock and rock. Come on.
Like you mentioned, her even being there and like the amount, like how aggressive she is with him, and I just thought it was strange for sure. Like at one point she like throws a banana peel on the ground. He slips on it.
He actually slips on it like a cartoon. Yeah.
He's like running into things like. The scene, like I get it, he's hypnotized, and maybe at the time that was like funnier because like the idea of hypnotism was different, I guess, at the time. But like it felt flat and unnecessary to have that additional.
It definitely felt like sort of childish cartoon humor, like oh he's gonna slip on a banana peel, right? And oh he's hypnotized. That's why. It's definitely like some old school child cartoon humor going on during that scene where him and the girl are meeting each other.
Yeah, which I guess also introduces us to the concept of Seymour knows more about the plant in the first film because he sort of created it. He's cross-pollinating, so he's talking about Venus flytraps, and apparently they only need to eat like 3 times to become fully grown. So there's this element of how many times will this plant eat people. Mr. Mushnick's in on it, so he knows that like people are dying. He's nervous about the consequences, but he's assuming that it's more or less safe because the plant is fed. Like I don't know, it seemed like just another body to add for this like concept that they wrote themselves that it had to eat 3 times. Like could have been 2 times, it could have been none. Like it just didn't make a lot of sense.
Yeah. So I'm looking at the list. It's a total of 4 victims in the original, and then we got only 2 in the remake. And yeah, it definitely seems like they did well by consolidating in the remake. You didn't need that many victims.
And, in the remake, they picked their spots. I think we kind of agree that the Mushnick aspect was a little overdone. Like the turn just happened a little too quick for him to be like bad enough to be killed by the plant for, the theater audience standards. But, they did a lot of good framing of why the dentist should have been out of there. So it was good to consolidate, but then you also kind of have this element of the plant didn't get a chance to do a lot, depending on what cut you saw. It's a scary, dangerous plant, but you know how dangerous and scary it is in the original, a little more so, I think. The remake, the plant's actually more fun than horrific for the most part.
I guess I could see where the theatrical ending can kind of take away from the villainy or impending doom from the Audrey 2. Yeah, interesting. Because, yeah, only 2 victims and a little bit of Seymour's blood. And these 2 victims in the remake, while maybe Mr. Mushnick is okay, obviously the dentist beating his woman, inflicting pain on people for fun. Mr. Mushnick, maybe a question mark, because he never really did anything that bad, but he does want money, so I guess the blackmailing aspect could sort of justify his death.
I think that's what they're going for there.
Again, just going back to the alternate ending, because I believe they killed Mr. Mushnick there, so when you saw Audrey and Seymour die at the end, you wouldn't be as surprised. That's why I think they killed him. It's like, if 2 of the people in the shop are dead at the end, you might as well have the other guy who works in the shop dead too. So it's nice and balanced in that aspect. But yeah, his death makes less sense with the original ending, is what I'm trying to say, in the remake.
I would agree. I would agree on that. It does make less sense. I guess to an extent, in either ending, I guess you do have it sort of the original deaths consolidated into the little shop of horrors, like people that work in the shop are the ones that are the initial victims. But now the Mushnick death just feels a little forced, depending on, what you're watching. It works in the remake because they wisely consolidate characters as well as deaths. We don't need the 2 co-eds who are doing the parade for the Rose Garden, which never happens. You introduce that concept, but it doesn't happen because of the events of the movie. You still have the people that are there to kind of validate him, give him the awards for the plants, but there's less people in every scene, and I think when you remove characters like that, you're going to have less characters to play your victims, and they picked victims that they could make bad enough for an audience to accept it. The character's dying.
Look at the original again. 3 of the victims are the homeless guy, the criminal, and the girl. They only show up right before they die, right? So there's no weight in their deaths. They're just kind of these randoms that just show up just to die. So it's kind of pointless. And then in the remake, you do have people we've already met who die. So there's a lot more weight to their deaths as opposed to the original. Which, again, I know it's a comedy, but establish characters first and then kill them. I like that rule.
I agree. Sometimes you're not going to capture it in one song. You're going to have to flesh them out a little bit more.
Yeah. So you kind of touched on this a little bit, but let's go into just some of the characters that are exclusive to each film, because not every character made the cut, I suppose. We talked about her a little bit, but in the original, Seymour has a mom that he lives with. He does not live with his mom in the remake. I believe he lives in the basement of the flower shop.
Right. He has sort of kind of like a tragic upbringing. Yeah, Mr. Mushnick took him in. So yeah, there's a different aspect to it. It makes sense because the mother character doesn't really do much. I think she's supposed to be funny in the original because she's constantly sick.
But what makes her feel better, Reggie?
Oh, booze.
Booze.
Booze. Yeah. That's funny. His mom's an alcoholic.
It's funny and it's true.
And that's what makes it funny. That it's true. Yeah, so, I don't think that we need a character that's constantly, pretending to be sick.
No.
So that she can get more booze. It just doesn't add much to the film. And it actually takes away from the Seymour-Audrey romance in the original because she hates Audrey and she's trying to push her son away from Audrey and trying to get him to, go out and, sow his oats and stuff. It's a little weird, to be honest.
Yeah.
And good cut, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree, too. It doesn't add anything to Seymour because nothing he does in the original, none of his motivations are to help his mother, right? She's just there, and he kind of has to deal with her. And we, as an audience, have to deal with her.
Oh, yeah, we have to deal.
Yes, we do. So we have to deal with her, when he brings her the booze. We have to deal with her when he's on a date with Audrey. She's kind of a one-note character, because once she's drunk, she's just a drunk mom. And she doesn't like I said, she doesn't bring any depth to Seymour, so I think another smart cut. We didn't need her at all in the remake. In addition to Mom, who we're missing, we're also missing our, I have him in my notes as the flower eating guy, portrayed by Dick Miller. Let me look up his real name here. Burson Fouch. So Burson Fouch, portrayed by Dick Miller, just this random flower eating enthusiast who's eaten apparently in flower shops all over the world. And he's, I guess, important in the original because he convinces Mr. Mushnick to, show Seymour's plant, because I've eaten all in flower shops all over the world, and I tell you, the ones that have the unique plants, they get the most people. That was sort of his contribution, his only contribution, really, to the film.
Really?
Other than, like, putting salt or pepper on flowers.
Yeah, that aspect we'll kind of ignore, but yeah, he is, unlike in the remake where Audrey is the one that says, hey, Seymour's got this interesting plant. You've got this guy who's...
No, she says it in the original, too.
Oh,
but it was after he said it that Mushnick agreed to do it.
Yeah, you're right, because when she says it, the guy, you're right, he reinforces that.
Yeah.
No, she's right. It would be interesting. I don't know why he's there. He's there a lot.
He is there a lot. He's there after Seymour goes home to get the plant and comes back. He's still there. It's pretty wild. And he's kind of a one-note character because all he's doing is eating plants. And then after you see it the first time, you're like, okay, I get it. But that's not the last time you're going to see it. You're going to see it a few more times in the movie. I like Dick Miller. Not a character I miss. I guess he was just introduced to just show you that this is a wacky world we live in the original. And don't take anything too seriously because, hey, is the guy eating flowers? No, you've never seen anybody eating flowers, have you?
Like I said, that's a major contribution. Reinforces some aspects of the importance of the plant, but other than that, not much to him. What would you say? I guess the equivalent would be kind of like a quick cut in a movie of someone saying, "Hey, interesting plant," in that weird '60s sort of way. But
our Christopher Guest in the remake. That guy.
Yes.
By the way, Christopher Guest, who I love all his movies. I recognized him. It looks like Christopher Guest, but does not sound like Christopher Guest at all. I've never heard him talk like that. So I was laughing the whole time because I'm a Chris Guest fan, and just to see him in this random cameo, it was cracking me up. So
it was really funny.
Yeah, because it was immediate. It was, the setup was like, oh, what do you think? We're gonna put this plant in the window and people are gonna walk in. Hey, I just walked in because I saw that plant in the window. It's like It was a beautifully set up. Always a fan of Christopher Guest. He's only in the remake, the theatrical cut, in that scene, but he is in the ending of the director's cut.
Yeah, there's a revelation that he's basically into like marketing and sales and stuff like that, and that he's taking it back to the boys in the lab, and they more Audrey 2s. It's going to be a hit. It's going to come off of every shelf in America. So he comes back into play, and that character does get another sort of fun, important sequence in the film. So
I kind of miss it then. I really need to see the director's cut ending. More Chris Guest? Yes. Sign me up. Absolutely.
But like, again, just pointing at the remake takes a similar sort of character that does effectively all the same things and utilizes the screen time in a much more efficient way.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Because you don't see him anymore until, I guess...
It's unnecessary.
Yeah, because it is unnecessary. But you see the guy who's eating flowers throughout the film. He lives at that shop for all I know. It's crazy.
I think there's like one line where he talks about maybe trying to get like a interest in the shop, like, buy into the shop in the original film. But like even that, it's like, why are you still here?
It doesn't go anywhere, so it's not even that important. I like Dick Miller though; he's a good guy. Anyway, one other character or characters in the original film are those two kind of. I labeled them as groupies. We call them the college girls from before. Seymour's kind of cheerleaders that like are in love with him. They need flowers for their float and everything. Again, I didn't really miss them in the remake. I completely forgot they were in the original when I was watching the remake. Less characters. I'm able to invest more in our main characters.
Unnecessary. Didn't really need them. They're actually, I think, in the film they're labeled as Shirley and Shirley's friend. That's how important. And one other sort of side character that gets a lot of screen time and who again is a one-note character but fairly important in the early parts of the film, Miss Shiva, who's played by Leola Windorf.
She's not in the remake, but she does get a little cameo mention. I liked, I guess, of all the side characters in the original. I liked hers the most because like every time she showed up in the shop, somebody was dead in her family, and it wasn't funny the first time, but I guess the third or fourth time a family member died, it just got ridiculous and got pretty funny.
It started to get funny.
Yeah, she has the tie to the PI who gave us the voiceover in the beginning. We didn't even talk about the PI, but his son died. Apparently, what did he die of again? I forgot.
While you're looking that up, the PI he did have a funny line towards the end of the movie where he's like, "No, we're starting to wrap up the investigation. Not that we knew who killed them, but we had to tell the chief something." And I thought that was a funny line. Didn't really do anything for me. I guess towards the end it does help add to the tragedy because the cops are after him. But like, I don't know, like the PI, do we need him? Probably not.
No, we didn't. I read on the Wikipedia that he's supposed to play a much bigger part, which makes a lot of sense for why his voiceover would start the movie, right? It's kind of this gumshoe. I was on this beat, and then I found about this weird case about a man-eating plant, and It doesn't really pay off at all. No. So, kid died playing matches. That's how he died. It's just funny. It's like, what did the cops say? I don't exactly remember. But like, hey, that's what happens, or something like that. Something along those effects. And it was
Detective Frank Stooley.
Okay, so the detective. As much as the detective didn't really impact the script at all, the manner that he described his son's death, that happens. And then he says that to his partner, and then he says it again to the woman who's his aunt later. So I was laughing at both of those beats, just because, what are you gonna do? My kid died playing with matches.
That's the thing. Like, the humor in the original film is in the absurd.
Yeah.
Just this woman who everyone in her family dies, like, all the time, and like that's the only reason that shop's still in business, more or less, at that point. You got the detective who's kind of part of it, kind of not, but like, the son died from matches. Like, he doesn't really care what happened because he's gonna make up a story either way. Like, that stuff's funny. The mom being alcoholic, like, I get it. Like, these are their set piece funny moments. I don't know, that remake though, some of the jokes, one that you can do in song, Steve Martin being the clear cut example, and Audrey too. Just some of the music with Audrey too is hilarious as well. Now you can see how much more room they have to flex with because the characters are actually fleshed out, even if you're doing it through music. So it just gave it a much more cohesive, funny feel to it that you don't quite get in the original. Everything seems to be sort of scattered and random with its funny.
And it doesn't really in the original doesn't pertain to our plot. It's just they're all sort of just side jokes, right? Yeah. And what the cops said, what the detective said was, "Oh, those are the breaks." That's what he kept saying every time his dead son came up. "Oh, those are the breaks." And it was just his delivery was perfect on that, and it was one of my biggest laughs during the original.
For sure, I enjoyed the character. Although, like you mentioned, it does make sense that he would have had a bigger part because it was all set up for him to have a bigger part.
Yeah, it makes sense. And I guess the remake has a character we don't have in the original, and that's John Candy doing another cameo. And I just have him in my notes as the radio guy. Let me try to see what his character name was. Okay, so John Candy made a cameo as Wink Wilkinson, a radio DJ. It wasn't a big part. It was a small little part. John Candy got to kind of yuck it up the way John Candy does. As a John Candy fan, I appreciate any cameo I could see John Candy in.
Yeah, it was a funny character. It did add to sort of the reason why Seymour was getting more fame because he's on this radio show. He's in the papers. Funny scene. You get the plant trying to like bite the ass.
Yeah, trying to lick the ass.
Whatever. Pretty funny, But I like I said, I appreciate the cameo. Does it really do much for the film? No, but I appreciate it. So
it doesn't help progress the story, but there's some funny beats in there to enjoy for sure.
There's definitely enough funny beats for us to both enjoy. But like when he first sits down in front of Wink Wilkinson and he's like going to start talking, but like Wink's having a conversation with himself.
Yeah, right. Like he's like, "Oh my god, we're gonna get shot here."
I didn't know she was married.
It's good. If you like John Candy, you're gonna like this cameo. Don't
worry
about it. I think that's about it for all the characters. Are there any other characters we missed that are?
No, and if we did, they probably weren't very important. No, I think we hit all these sort of overarching like characters that mattered, that even got lip service in the remake as well. Like you said, Miss Shiva
Yeah.
is mentioned, though not pictured.
She's mentioned. I remember is Mushnik's like, oh, her family members die all the time. We need to get her flowers. So I appreciated that nod to the original.
Absolutely.
We didn't
But no,
get a phone call. Oh, this guy eats flowers all the time. We need to get flowers for him. We didn't get
yeah,
one of those.
nah, we didn't need that. I found those characters to be ranging in necessity, but they were fun.
All right. Unless you want to go over anything else, I believe we've covered everything.
No, I think we nailed the differences between doing a musical and a standard comedy. I think we sort of nailed how the different characters and how they act, change the film. I think we kind of nailed generally like the overview.
All right, man. So let's go for the verdicts. Here we go. Reggie, should this remake have been made?
This remake should have been made, and one of the main reasons why is because it does forge its own path. Like by going a different genre, and really not necessarily being quite based on the first film, but more on the musical. It's fun, man. Some of that music is great. The set design, the way they design Audrey too, it's incredible. I mean, like you mentioned, to this day, it still looks awesome. I liked a lot about it. I found it to be very funny. There were some moments where, it was the slower songs that at times took me out of the film, but they were necessary for character development. I like the remake a lot, and I think that it should absolutely exist.
So when I was watching the original, again, I watched the original black and white. I don't necessarily know if it was even like HD or anything, but like when I was watching it, a couple of things that I thought, what could the remake do to improve itself? It's like you definitely need to improve just the way it's shot. Like I said before, because there's only just two cameras and they're all sort of these panned out shots, it does kind of just look like a stage production. So I didn't really get this cinematic feel. And another thing was, I didn't mention this at all during my review, but the audio, a lot of ADR that didn't sound good.
Oh,
Yeah, we didn't even talk about that, but a lot of that just didn't match or didn't sound good. It sounded out of place. So I was like, as long as they're able to improve on those two areas and maybe make some updated jokes, I feel like the remake will work well. And they were able to do that and so much more. Again, as you said, it's a musical comedy. They added that element. It gave itself its own identity, the remake, by making a musical comedy, a much welcomed addition. And I think it works out really well. Again, like you said, it gives those characters more development. They're able to have these solo moments to themselves where you're able to learn who they are, their motivations, then you root for them. And I mean, I've said it before, but the puppeteering on that Audrey too, just it still holds up today. I like the cast. I love the cameos in the remake. I don't think there's anything in that remake that I'm like, I don't think they should have done that. I know I complained a little bit about the musical numbers being a little long, but I think the remake did everything right. And this is a fine example of how you do a remake. I know it's not necessarily based on the original film. That's more off the off-Broadway play. But hey, whatever they did on the off-Broadway play, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, right? So yeah, let's make a movie of that. And it works amazing. Great cast, great characters, a much improved remake over the original source material. So this is definitely one to watch, one to check out. And if anything, just watch those Steve Martin scenes because they will have you smiling the whole time. I guarantee.
What I think the film did the best was have its own identity.
Yeah, agreed.
A lot of times remakes, we're so, married to the original material. Because it's an older film, maybe there was less of that. Like if you'd, for instance, done like this 1986 film and then done something more recent today, I think we'd have some of our usual remake issues. But no, they separate themselves from the source material in a way that, hey, both things can exist. I got no problem with either one because they're doing their own thing. So if you like the musical one, watch that. If you like just a straight up comedy, go watch that. It's a great idea to do your own thing with the material.
And I think another thing that really helps the remake is just the amount of time they put into it. Like I said before, the original 2.5 days to film, that's not a lot of time. Steve Martin scenes alone, 6 weeks just to get that, okay? So you're going to get a much higher quality production out of the remake than you are from the original. I think the original is definitely worth checking out just because there are some jokes that do work that you won't see in the original. It's just because some of those characters have been cut. And, you know, it's interesting, you know, you just see Jack Nicholson in his one of his earliest roles. But that remake, this is one of those rare remakes that just really goes miles above the original, in my opinion.
Completely agree. I guess we're saying that this movie should have been made.
Yes, absolutely. Incredibly enjoyable. Everything. Even if you don't like musicals, I think the way they did it in the comedy form, it'll play well.
I should have mentioned that in general, I'm not really a musical guy.
Oh, me neither. No, not at all.
I usually find them to be just a little too cheesy.
Yeah, I can't. I don't like Newsies at all. Like, I couldn't get into it.
This one embraced the camp. I did feel the elements of Off Broadway because it just reminded me of that, you know, that type of show so much, and I think they embraced it while still keeping it, as you mentioned, still keeping it Hollywood, still keeping it a movie. You got a little bit of everything, and man, they nailed it. I mean, I got nothing really bad to say about the film.
Agreed. Watch the remake. It's good. You'll have a good time. I love those Steve Martin scenes. I did have some kind of random facts about this. The casting of Audrey in the remake. I'm going to put it to you. Who do you think they wanted originally? I'll give you a hint. It's not an actress. It's a musician from the 80s.
Oh, wow, because I was just going to say Tim Curry for...
would have been phenomenal casting, by the way, if Tim Curry was Audrey.
Let's see. I'm just going to throw Madonna out there.
She's rumored to have been the second choice.
Okay.
But the first choice, think more 80s.
More 80s. Tiffany was doing her mall tour at the time.
Maybe a little too young, too.
Yeah. Damn, I'm trying to think 80s. Now, you know, I've also been drinking, so I'm going to let you take that one back.
You're going to say now, Cyndi Lauper.
Wow.
Yeah, and I think that would have been a pretty good casting choice, actually.
That would have been pretty cool, actually.
Yeah, that would have been pretty rad. I'm kind of bummed out that she was too busy to do it. But...
too busy having fun.
With the girls, right? Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Okay, I know. Go ahead. Downvote us for that. Yeah, that was a terrible joke. Let me try to think of the other.
I was looking at some stuff on like the IMDb page.
All right, what do you got? You got something?
Mean Green Mother from Outer Space, which was written for this film, was the first Oscar-nominated song to contain profanity.
Yes, because the word shit is said during that song. I noticed that when I was watching it. Not only once, twice, at least twice, the word shit is said. So cool.
And I saw one other little factoid. I don't know if you had this one, but the dentist's office was originally more grungy and blood splattered, but those details didn't go over well with those test audiences. So they switched it up.
Yeah, I saw that too. So they kept it nice, clean.
And test audiences.
Oh, this is an obvious trivia one. We have Jackie Joseph, who played Audrey. We have Dick Miller, who played the plant-eating guy, both in the original, right? They were also both a couple in not one, but two 80s movies. Two 80s, let's call them horror comedies, kind of, borderline. Can you identify them?
I'm so bad at
it's
trivia.
Okay. Well, Jackie Joseph and Dick Miller were both in Gremlins. Gremlins 1 and 2.
Oh.
As the married couple, they were the Futtermans.
Nice.
That is such a fucking cool thing to just like, hey, I like these people in the original Little Shop of Horrors. I'm going to cast them as the married couple in Gremlins. Yeah, so they were in both Gremlins movies. I thought that was so cool.
That's pretty cool.
I guess another little tidbit. Bill Murray, while his lines in the waiting room were scripted, but all Bill Murray's lines in the operating room were all ad-lib. And he filmed for 2 days, and he was an editor's nightmare because he just made up different shit all the time, which Bill Murray is known to do, just like so much ad-lib. So it makes sense.
That totally makes sense, and it works. You know, directors usually don't like when you do that, but it's Bill Murray, so he can do whatever he wants.
And I guess I'll just end it here. Like, a lot of these guys in the remake have also been in other films together. Like, we got Rick Moranis and John Candy. Do you know what film they've been in together? I'm putting you on the spot. I'm putting you on the big spot right now. Think of a sci-fi comedy.
Is it Spaceballs?
It is Spaceballs. We have Dark Helmet and Barf. And then we have John Candy and Steve Martin were also in another well-known comedy. Do you know what comedy they were in together.
The problem is I do, but I'm really bad when I'm put on the spot. Nah, you got me.
Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, of course.
Of course.
Classic. And then, of course, we have Rick Moranis and Bill Murray. They were in a comedy together. I've already said it. You can probably name it or both of them.
Well, you're not talking about Ghostbusters, are you?
Yeah, it's Ghostbusters.
Ghostbusters.
one or two. Doesn't matter. So a lot of these guys have worked together a lot of times. It's pretty cool. All right. So definitely check out Little Shop of Horrors, the remake. And maybe check out the original too. It's free on Amazon Prime. You can watch it in color or in black and white, the original black and white. I would recommend the color version, having watched a little bit of both, because the black and white I don't think it's in HD.
Both versions are like in SD, but like colorized, it just looks better.
It definitely looks, and it's easier to see. It's just easier to see everything. So let's figure out the next episode, Reggie. All right, so we just did a kind of a comedy and a musical comedy. So maybe we want to do maybe an action movie, maybe?
Yeah, I think it's time again.
We had mentioned this before. What about Death Wish?
Wow, Death Wish. Yeah.
Let's check out Death Wish.
Death Wish.
Bronson versus Willis. Let's see how it goes.
Oh, boy. I mean, yeah.
Seeing as there were like 17 of the original Death Wish and only one of the remake, I wonder what we'll think.
I think we'll think something. Well, this has been another great episode of Retro versus Remake.
Yeah, definitely let us know what you think in the comments. Feel free to reach us at
RP Comedy on Twitter and Instagram.
Or you could check me out at Console Wars Guys on Twitter and Instagram, I believe. And you could also check me out at youtube.com/Console Wars and just comment on the video I post up there.
Definitely comment, upvote. Thank you for listening. Many more episodes to come.
Yeah. Again, thanks to everybody that's already subscribed and given us great ratings on iTunes. Much appreciated to all you guys. You guys are awesome. So thank you again.
I'm Reggie Parker.
And I'm Dan Bulick. This was another episode of
Retro versus Remake.